On Christmas Eve, I learned what betrayal truly looked like. I thought I was going to surprise my daughter with warmth, laughter, and holiday cheer. Instead, I found her outside in the freezing night, trembling in the snow, while her husband's family toasted inside around a fire, as if she didn't exist. That night, when I carried her into my arms and banged on their door, I swore one thing: they would not get away with what they had done. I had just returned from Seattle, exhausted after coaching the national taekwondo team. I'd planned this visit carefully, keeping it a secret so I could see the joy on Emily's face when her mom appeared unannounced. The taxi dropped me off a short walk from her house in Boise. My boots sank into the thick snow, the icy wind cutting my face until I pulled my coat tight around me. Still, I felt warm inside, thinking of Emily's smile, the way she used to cling to me as a little girl and beg for another bedtime story. Through the window, I saw Christmas lights twinkling, a long table set with roasted turkey, cornbread stuffing, and glasses of red wine. The Whitlocks, my son-in-law Ryan's family, were laughing and raising their glasses near the fireplace. But Emily was not with them. I searched for her among the chatter and festive glow, but she was nowhere to be seen. Then I heard a faint whimper. Turning, I found her curled up on a wooden chair outside, only a thin blouse covering her as snow clung to her hair. Her lips were pale, her body shaking so hard I thought she might break apart. I rushed to her, wrapping my jacket around her shoulders. Her whisper was so faint it nearly vanished into the wind. "Mom," she breathed, then collapsed against me. My heart clenched as I lifted her in my arms. Inside, laughter rang out as Ryan bragged about something to his family. The sound was cruel, mocking, as if they were celebrating her suffering. I carried Emily to the door and pounded until Evelyn Whitlock, Ryan's mother, opened it with a fake smile and a glass of wine in her hand. Her voice dripped with false politeness, suggesting Emily had just stepped outside for fresh air. Behind her, Ryan appeared, arrogant and cold, insisting his wife was just being fragile. Their words sliced me open. I kicked the door open, holding Emily against me as the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward us, Evelyn's fake warmth replaced with contempt, Ryan smirking with defiance, and Mr. Harold Whitlock, Ryan's father, staring at me with the authority of a man who believed he owned everything in that house. They mocked Emily openly. 4 miscarriages, they said, had made her useless. Abigail, Ryan's sister, sneered that she was lazy and faked depression. Even Evelyn sipped her wine as she called my daughter a burden. Each word was a blade, my fists clenched. But I kept my focus on Emily, setting her down on a couch and covering her shivering frame with my scarf. My fury boiled over. I shouted at them that leaving her outside in 32-degree weather was abuse, not tradition. Evelyn shrugged like I was hysterical, while Ryan laughed bitterly, insisting Emily had embarrassed him enough. That night, I carried Emily out of the Whitlock's house. Jake, a police officer and one of my former students, was standing outside. He had overheard everything and gave me a steady nod. He would be my witness. Back at my apartment, I wrapped Emily in warm clothes and sat by her side until she fell asleep. The next morning, a therapist confirmed what I already knew. Years of cruel words, 4 miscarriages, and constant rejection had pushed her into deep depression. I blamed myself for being gone so often for my work, for not protecting her sooner. Not long after, an envelope appeared at my door with a warning scrawled inside: "Give up, or you'll end up just as miserable as your daughter." That threat only hardened my resolve. I began collecting every bank receipt, every note, every proof that I had supported Emily. I called an old lawyer friend, determined to face the Whitlocks head-on. It wasn't long before Ryan filed for divorce, and the battle that followed revealed just how much power his family held in Boise. The courtroom became another kind of battlefield. My lawyer presented records of my support, Emily's medical files, Even a secret audio recording Jake had taken on Christmas Eve where the Whitlocks called her useless and mocked her pain. But the judge ruled it inadmissible. The Whitlocks' lawyers painted Emily as lazy and deceitful, parading a former housekeeper who lied under oath. And though Emily sat trembling beside me, her face pale and her hands shaking, the court sided with Ryan. The divorce was granted, but abuse was dismissed for lack of evidence. Most of the assets went to Ryan, leaving Emily with almost nothing. In that moment, I realized the Whitlocks had balked justice. Harold's influence as a former judge was everywhere in the courtroom. When Ryan leaned close and whispered in my ear, calling me a useless old woman, I nearly snapped. My fists ached to strike him, but Emily's trembling voice stopped me, begging for peace. The sight of her clinging to Jake in tears was captured on camera, spreading across local news and social media. Public opinion began to turn. The Whitlocks won in court, but outside, whispers of corruption grew. People saw Emily's pain, her years of humiliation, and their voices rose where the law had failed. Through it all, I held Emily close, helping her heal day by day. Jake stood by us, bringing her small tokens of kindness, a keychain, a bouquet, simple meals that reminded her she was worth love. Slowly, Emily began to smile again. One day, she told him she might never have children, afraid it would disappoint him, but Jake only smiled and told her she was already family. That moment, watching her believe she was enough for the first time in years, gave me more hope than any courtroom ever could. Justice isn't always found in verdicts or gavels. Sometimes it's found in the quiet resilience of surviving, in the kindness of those who see your worth when others don't. The Whitlocks may have taken much, but they couldn't erase Emily's spirit or my love for her. And though I once taught Taekwondo students to fight with their fists, I know now the greatest strength lies in fighting for the ones you love, with truth, with endurance, and with a heart that refuses to break. The days after the trial felt heavy, as though a storm cloud followed us everywhere. Emily rarely spoke, retreating into long silences while staring at the ceiling of my small apartment. Some mornings she barely touched the breakfast I prepared, just holding a cup of tea until it went cold in her hands. I stayed close, telling myself that if I kept showing up with love, eventually she would feel safe again. Every knock on the door made my heart race, afraid it might be another threat from the Whitlocks. But sometimes it was Jake, arriving with groceries or a bouquet of flowers, his steady presence slowly drawing Emily back from the edge. It was strange how quickly the world outside started paying attention. One photo from the courtroom, Emily clinging to Jake's arm while Ryan sneered in the background, circulated online. The image struck a nerve, sparking outrage. Comments flooded in. How could any family do this on Christmas Eve? And, Emily deserves justice. Local journalists picked up the story, writing about whispers of Harold Whitlock pulling strings behind the scenes. For the first time, the Whitlocks looked less like a powerful family and more like villains, exposed under a harsh light. That gave me a sliver of strength. The court had failed us, but the court of public opinion was waking up. Emily, though, was still fragile. One night she walked into the kitchen while I was sorting papers and whispered, "Mom, I'm scared they'll never stop." Her voice shook, her eyes filled with fear that the Whitlocks would crush us no matter where we turned. I hugged her tight and told her what I had promised myself the night I carried her in from the snow. I would protect her with every breath I had left. She had carried enough pain. Now it was my turn to carry her. Spring thawed the streets of Boise, and little by little, I saw Emily begin to heal. Jake often came by after his shifts, sometimes with donuts, sometimes with nothing more than his company. Emily listened to his stories about life as a cop, and I watched her eyes brighten, the shadows fading bit by bit. One afternoon, he nervously handed her a small keychain shaped like a Taekwondo uniform. "You don't have to be strong all at once," he said softly. Just start over, step by step. Emily stared at it, her eyes filling with tears. She clutched the keychain like it was proof someone truly believed in her, but the Whitlocks weren't finished. Their arrogance lingered in every corner of this city. A thin envelope arrived at my apartment one evening. Inside was another note. You can't win. Walk away while you can. My anger burned hotter than fear. They wanted to break us, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I leaned harder into preparing for the long battle ahead. I gathered every record I had, bank transfers, medical notes, years of proof that I had stood by my daughter. The Whitlocks might have won the first round, but I was determined to keep fighting. Even so, not all battles are fought in court. One Easter afternoon, I took Emily by the hand and walked with her through Boise's town square. Children ran with painted eggs, laughter echoing through the crisp air. Emily wore a light sweater, and for the first time in months I saw her smile. Small at first, then brighter as the sunlight caught her face. She leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, I miss when we baked pies together." I missed those days. I squeezed her hand. "We'll make new ones," I promised. That moment reminded me that victories weren't always loud. Sometimes they were quiet, found in the way your child slowly came back to life after nearly losing everything. Later that evening, Jake joined us with a bag of warm churros. He handed one to Emily, and she laughed softly, thanking him. Watching the two of them talk, seeing a flicker of warmth return to her, I realized something. Justice didn't have to come from the hands of men in black robes or from families with power. It could come from kindness, from resilience, from the love that refused to die. The Whitlocks could strip Emily of money, of property, even of her name in court records. But they could not take away the fact that she was alive. She was loved, and she was no longer alone. Every day after, I held on to that truth. It became my shield against bitterness. I had taught my Taekwondo students that the strongest warrior is not the one who strikes the hardest, but the one who refuses to fall. And though my fists still ached from rage, I finally understood that my greatest strength wasn't in breaking bones. It was in standing, unshaken, beside my daughter, through every storm, until the day she could finally stand tall again on her own. Summer came to Boise, and the city streets bloomed with farmers' markets and warm breezes that carried the scent of barbecues. On the surface, life seemed to be returning to normal, but beneath it, the shadow of the Whitlocks lingered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Emily was improving slowly. Her cheeks held more color, her voice steadier, but she still woke up some nights drenched in sweat from nightmares. I would sit on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, whispering that she was safe now. I knew she didn't fully believe it yet, but I kept repeating it until her breathing softened and she drifted back to sleep. Jake continued to visit, his quiet loyalty anchoring both of us. Sometimes he came in uniform, fresh from duty, his presence a reminder that we weren't entirely defenseless. Other times he arrived in plain clothes, carrying a basket of fruit or a handful of flowers from a roadside stand. His gentleness with Emily made me believe he might be the first person outside of me who truly saw her worth. One evening I overheard him telling her, "Your scars don't make you weak. They prove you've survived." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't look away. Despite this fragile peace, I knew the Whitlocks weren't done. Rumors swirled in town that Harold had pulled strings to secure Ryan a lucrative position at a law firm, a reward for surviving the scandal. Evelyn was seen at charity galas, pretending to be a saintly matriarch while gossiping about Emily behind her champagne glass. Every time I heard their names, my jaw tightened. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore, but I couldn't accept that people like them could destroy lives without consequence. Then, something unexpected happened. A local journalist knocked on my apartment door, notebook in hand. She had been following the whispers of corruption surrounding Harold and wanted to interview us. Emily froze, panic flashing in her eyes, but I gently placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to say a word," I told her. "I'll handle it." For 2 hours I spoke to the journalist about that Christmas Eve, about the trial, about the threats we'd received. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. The next week, a bold headline appeared in the Boise Chronicle. "Whitlock Power Tested. Allegations of abuse and corruption surface." The article spread quickly. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now offered us sympathetic smiles. People in the grocery store whispered, "Stay strong," as we passed. The Whitlocks tried to dismiss the story as lies, but seeds of doubt had already been planted. Ryan's law firm received angry calls, and Harold's reputation, once untouchable, began to crack. I didn't celebrate. I only felt a grim sense of balance. Like the scales of justice had shifted slightly, even if no gavel had fallen in our favor. Meanwhile, Emily kept moving forward. She started seeing Dr. Carter, her therapist, twice a week. She took slow walks with Jake in the park, sometimes holding his arm for support, sometimes walking freely, her head a little higher than before. One afternoon, she came into the kitchen where I was making soup and said, "Mom, I think I want to try working again someday. Something small, maybe at a bakery." Her voice trembled with uncertainty, but her eyes held a spark I hadn't seen in years. I dropped the ladle, hugged her tight, and whispered, "That's all I need to hear. You're finding your way back." Still, the nights were the hardest. Sometimes Emily's voice cracked with fear, asking, "What if they come after us again?" And I would remind her, they already tried, and we're still here. That truth, simple but solid, gave her comfort. For me, it became a mantra. No matter what Harold or Ryan or Evelyn whispered behind closed doors, we had survived. They couldn't take that from us. By autumn, the air turned crisp again, leaves crunching under our feet as we walked downtown. Emily, wearing a scarf Jake had given her, actually laughed out loud at something he said, the sound carrying like music through the chilly air. My heart swelled at that laugh. For months it had been buried under silence and sobs. Now it was returning, fragile but real. I knew then that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something new, despite it. And though the Whitlocks still loomed, their power wasn't absolute anymore. Emily's smile, Jake's loyalty, and the quiet strength inside me. Those were the things that mattered most. They were the weapons that couldn't be bought or broken. And in that truth, I began to believe we had already won. Winter returned to Boise. Almost exactly 1 year since that Christmas Eve when everything changed. The city was dressed in lights again, families carrying trees on car roofs, children running through snowbanks with cheeks red from the cold. For most people, it was a season of joy. For Emily, the holidays were still painful reminders. But I could see she was stronger now. She no longer walked with her head down. She looked people in the eye. Sometimes she even hummed softly in the mornings as she made tea. Small things, but to me they felt like miracles. That December, Jake came by with a tree strapped to his truck. "You can't have Christmas without this," he said with a grin. Emily laughed nervously, her hands twisting the edge of her sweater, but she helped him drag it inside. We decorated it together, hanging old ornaments I had saved from her childhood. Emily placed the last one, a little ceramic angel she'd made in 2nd grade, near the top. When she stepped back, I saw her smile. Fragile, yes, but real. My eyes stung with tears. I hadn't seen her look that peaceful in years. Meanwhile, the Whitlocks were unraveling in public. The newspaper articles and social media outrage hadn't gone away. Harold was quietly removed from a prestigious board he'd chaired for decades. Ryan's law firm distanced itself from him, shuffling him into work behind the scenes to avoid further scandal. Evelyn still appeared at social events, dressed in expensive gowns, but whispers followed her everywhere. Their once untouchable image was tarnished, and I knew deep down they were finally paying a price, even if it wasn't handed down by a judge. Still, they tried to intimidate us. Another letter came, slipped under the apartment door, but this time I didn't feel fear. I tore it in half and tossed it in the trash. Emily watched me and asked quietly, "Mom, aren't you afraid?" I shook my head. Not anymore. They've already lost the one thing they cared about most, their reputation. She sat beside me, her shoulders no longer slumped, and whispered, "Then maybe I don't have to be afraid either." On Christmas Eve, almost exactly 12 months after that terrible night, Emily surprised me. She came into the living room where Jake and I were sipping cocoa and said, "I want to go to midnight mass." For years, she had avoided crowds, afraid of whispers and stares. Now she wanted to walk into a church full of people. I was stunned, but I simply nodded. "Let's go." The three of us walked through the snowy streets, the bells ringing from St. Mary's steeple. Inside, candles flickered and carols filled the air. Emily slid into the pew beside me, her hand trembling in mine, but she didn't let go. I glanced at her face, illuminated by candlelight, and for the first time in so long, she didn't look broken. She looked like a survivor. When the choir began singing Silent Night, Emily's lips moved softly along with the words. I closed my eyes, holding her hand, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. A year ago, I thought I might lose her forever. Now, though scars remained, she was here, singing, standing, healing. And that was more precious than any verdict or piece of property the Whitlocks had stolen. After the service, as we walked home under falling snow, Jake carried a lantern to light the path. Emily leaned against him, and I walked behind, watching them. The snow muffled the world, leaving only the crunch of our boots and the sound of her soft laughter as Jake teased her about slipping on the ice. It was a simple scene, but to me it felt like the truest kind of justice. Life doesn't always punish the wicked in ways we can see. Courts can be bought, lies can be dressed as truth, and powerful names can twist the law. But I've learned that real justice often blooms quietly, in resilience, in love that refuses to die, in the courage to keep standing even when the world tries to knock you down. I don't know what the future will bring for Emily, for Jake, or for me, but I do know this. The Whitlocks will never own her spirit again. And as long as I live, I will fight to make sure my daughter knows she is worthy of love, dignity, and peace. If you've stayed with me through this story, I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly but still find the strength to rise again? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your words might give hope to someone who needs it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more stories like this can reach hearts around the world.